for its construction. Amid the systematic devastation to Gaza's health system, Rafah Hospital is one of Gaza's largest and most critical lifelines. 5, the south of the Gaza Strip, as Jens has been speaking to, is also the entry point for most of the aid that enters Gaza. A military assault will greatly complicate aid delivery and likely see that gate closed. It's hard to see, if that closes for an extended period, how aid agencies avert famine across the Gaza Strip. 6, families' coping capacity has been smashed. Families are hanging on psychologically and physically by a thread. I do not recall meeting a single family, and I met scores, a single family in Rafah who hadn't lost a home or a loved one or both. People are exhausted, they're malnourished, children are sick. And that brings us to the last, the health of those in Rafah. Hundreds of thousands of children in Rafah have a disability or a medical condition or a vulnerability that puts them at even greater jeopardy and makes it so much more difficult for them to relocate, if there was anywhere for them to relocate to. In Rafah, I saw children who'd had amputations now in tents because hospitals are full. Those children, and many, many more, are now told to go to zones such as Al-Mawasi, the so-called safe zone of Al-Mawasi, where UNICEF reported a couple of weeks ago on a little boy called Mustafa who had left his family home to go and get parsley for dinner and was shot in the head. Mustafa was killed. In the safe zone, so-called safe zone of Al-Mawasi, the zone where children and families in Rafah are now told to go to. This past weekend's events in Gaza, the continued killing of children, more attacks from the warring parties and now evacuation orders, yet again expose how parties to this conflict continue to utterly disregard the lives and protection of civilians and of children. This has to change, and this is the last moment for that to change. Aid must flow, hostages must be freed, Rafah must not be invaded, and children must stop being killed. We've pleaded, we have implored countless times, and we do so once more. For the children of Rafah, we need a ceasefire now.
Thank you very much, James. And let me add, please, on behalf of you, women who have asked me to convey to you this information. Please be informed that there is a new survey data from Rafah that has been published, I think it was yesterday night, pretty late, and is available on UN Women. I think we have distributed to you the press release. This new UN Women survey data from Rafah highlights the depth of physical and mental despair, with 93% of women interviewed feeling unsafe and over half reporting medical conditions requiring urgent attention. We have in this press release lots of data that I would ask you to have a look at. This data collected by UN Women reveals, for example, that more than 10,000 women have been killed in Gaza since the start of the war, among them 6,000 mothers, leaving 19,000 orphaned children behind. And we've heard from James the condition of life of these children. The survey also sheds light on the devastating reality of women and girls in Rafah, including the fact that Rafah now hosts 700,000 women and girls who have nowhere else to go. Over 80% of women report feeling of depressions, 66% are not able to sleep, over 70% have heightened anxiety and nightmares. More than half of women surveyed, that is 51%, have a medical condition requiring urgent medical attention since the start of the war. More than 6 out of 10 of the interviewed women who are currently pregnant or have been pregnant since 7 October reported complications. And in households with nursing mothers, 72% reported that there are challenges in breastfeeding and meeting the nutritional needs of babies. And I will conclude with a statement by Sima Bahous, UN Women Executive Director, that said, Women and girls in Rafah, as in the rest of Gaza, are in a state of constant despair and fear already. A ground invasion would be an unbearable escalation that risks killing thousands more civilians and forcing hundreds of thousands to flee again. We must protect civilians. We need an immediate ceasefire and unimpeded and safe humanitarian aid distribution across all Gaza. The need for peace has never been more urgent. This is our only hope, concludes the UN Women Executive Director, which calls for the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 2728 of 25th of March 2024, which demands an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and safe and unimpeded access for humanitarian aid. And our colleagues at UN Women are, of course, available if you have any questions on this data. And with that, just a last information before we open the floor to question, just to inform you that at 9:30 a.m., which is, of course, 3:30, if I'm not wrong, Geneva time, 9:30 in New York, the Secretary General is expected to speak to the press, to deliver remarks on the situation in Gaza. And of course, you will be able to follow this on UN Web TV. And let's start with the question. There are many. I've seen first, Jeremy.
Hi. You responded already in a way, but I'd like to maybe have a more comprehensive answer on exactly what kind of facilities the UN have in the so-called red zone right now. You mentioned the European hospital, of any others, and has the UN been asking its personnel on the ground to evacuate as well? And regarding evacuation, we're hearing reports from people on the ground that people who are not in the red zone are already evacuating to Al-Mawazi and the north. So have you been hearing those reports as well? Are you hearing that people are evacuating Rafah regardless of the zones where they are right now?
Yeah, thank you. What we have in that zone that has been designated as an evacuation zone by the IDF. And mind you, now 76% of the territory of Gaza is under evacuation orders. 76%. In that area, there are 9 sites sheltering displaced people. It's also home to 3 clinics and 6 warehouses. And of course, that is part of what I mean when I say that this is a devastating blow to the aid operation in Rafah and beyond. So it has terrible repercussions. In terms of movements, we have seen people move. I think it's fair to say that the reports that we get from colleagues on the ground is that panic and despair has taken hold. People are terrified. We have seen images of people fleeing with what they have. It's extremely difficult for us to have exact numbers on this for the reasons that you can all understand. And they are moving towards the north. We have, for some time, actually, extended our presence towards the north because we knew that people were going there. And our purpose as humanitarians is, of course, to be where people are, regardless of how or why they got there. But we can discuss that and we can protest the way this is being done. But of course, our imperative is to help people, and we will go to where they are. So we have seen that movement. Now, what is very important with these kind of evacuation orders, and that is enshrined in international humanitarian law, is that one, people must have adequate time to prepare for the evacuation. Has that happened? No. They need a safe route or corridor to get to the designated area. Have they had that? Is that present? Absolutely not. On units, we've heard the reports from the missions going there. It's littered with unexploded ordnance, massive bombs lying in the street. It's not safe. 3, the point of destination must be safe, and they must have access to humanitarian aid. Is that the case? No, it's not safe. We've just heard that. And by the way, the area that they have designated as quote unquote safe zone, they changed. You have seen the map that they have put out. It's about 3 times the size that it was previously. So these things are constantly fluctuating, and that is not a conducive environment for carrying out a safe evacuation of people. So they must have access to aid where they go. That is not the case, particularly in Al-Mawasi. The major problem is that there's no infrastructure. What underpins a humanitarian operation is access to electricity, access to water and sanitation system, sewage system, and so on. That it's not there. It's simply not there. And finally, but that's looking a bit farther ahead. If such an evacuation is carried out, people must be allowed to return to where they come from when it's safe to do so.
From UNICEF, yes, that crossing is where our supplies come through almost exclusively. That's water, and I explained some of the data in terms of the sheer lack of safe water. It's in Rafah, it's around 1 litre per person in a household, which is catastrophically below any emergency levels. So that is people's lifeline, absolute, and simply cannot maintain that without supplies coming through there. UNICEF won't leave. Our motto, very much like we heard from UNRWA yesterday and from I'm sure all other agencies, to stay and deliver. In terms of we've had people moving not from those zones. Yes, I've spoken to people. I speak to people regularly there and was asking how they were yesterday. 2 things struck me. One, yes, people are moving from other areas in Rafah. And I think that's because they have realised that it's important to look at the evidence of what's happened in Gaza in the last 7 months rather than the language used. So the language used now is, of course, quote unquote, limited invasion. Now, as we've spoken about previously here from this platform, it was in November, December where promises were made that the south of Gaza would not possibly endure the ferocity of the north. And then I've stood in Khan Yunis, the neighbouring city to Rafah, and seen utter devastation, 360 degrees, more intense devastation of a city than anywhere in my 20 years. So people are well aware that they need to look at the evidence and the way this war is being conducted rather than what leaflets say. The final point I'd say to that is the people I spoke to yesterday just showed, again, a level of trauma. This was families who were aware that they would have to move, had been aware for months that this worst case scenario may come. And the people I spoke to invariably would say, I'm frozen. I don't even know what to pack. 7 months now. We talk, of course, of 2/3 of houses, homes and destroyed. We talk of reports of more than 14,000 children killed. So somehow we don't talk of not a single university still functioning, not a child has been to school for a year, and an unprecedented level of child trauma. That's what we're seeing now, again, in these children who are told, pick up your last surviving remnants of your life, and we move from tent to tent. That's also what's happening to children in Rafah now.
Thank you, Nancy. Margaret, welcome. You may have also something. Welcome.
You asked about the hospital specifically, and Al-Najjar is in the, sorry, better? Yeah. Al-Najjar is in the zone that's been designated, has been advised people to move. Now, they are not moving. They're staying open and continuing to accept patients, but they are also the only place now in Gaza where dialysis is taking place. They're doing around 200 dialyses per day. So again, if they're no longer functioning, if they're shut down, that means all those people will die simply from kidney failure, because that's what's keeping them alive. They are also overwhelmed. All the hospitals, there are 3 hospitals currently functioning in the Rafah area. They are all overwhelmed. They are all receiving more cases than they can deal with. The European hospital in Khan Yunis is also threatened by this action because it will be cut off. So it, again, is a very important hospital for dealing with the wounded. It's called the European Hospital because the EU has funded it, but it will probably not be able to function as well, or it will be difficult for patients to access due to the incursion.
Thank you to all colleagues. And yes.
Yes, thank you. That would be a question to here. I'm here to Jens. You mentioned
We were having a geographic discussion. According to my information, Europeans in East Han Yunis, but James has been there. It's Rafah, is it?
It's Rafah. It's right on the border of the first evacuation order from yesterday. But as Jens said, that has changed.
I've seen lots of hands. No, I won't forget. Agnes was waiting. Agnes, go ahead.
yes, my okay, yeah. So the question concerns Kerem Shalom. You say that it was closed, but you didn't mention why. If you could let us know why. And concerning the fuel, so we understand that the fuel cannot entry anymore into Rafah and Gaza in general, if you could specify, and how many stocks do you have in Gaza or in Rafah of fuel, and for how many days, if you could specify. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens.
Yeah, thank you, Agnes. Kerem Shalom is operated by the Israeli Defense Force, and they have closed it. Simple as that. You have seen a few days ago there was an attack in that area. Of course, we call on those who perpetrated this attack to stop doing so. I mean, this is devastating as well. But it is the IDF that closes it down. As I mentioned, Rafah is currently under the crossing is currently under the IDF control, and we've been told there will be no crossings of personnel or goods in or out for the time being. For how long, I have no idea. But that's the current situation. Now, that has a massive impact, if you like, on your next question. How much do we have? We've been told that there's a very, very short buffer of about 1 day of fuel available, primarily diesel to run trucks and to run generators. So there's that. We know by and large that of all the aid that comes in, it's pretty much distributed immediately. It's not like that there's huge warehouses full of aid. It's distributed immediately for good reasons.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you said 1 day for Rafah, or 1 day for all Gaza?
This is as fuel only comes in through Rafah. The 1 day buffer is for the entire operation in Gaza.
Benjamin.
Thanks, Alessandra. Question to Jens, and then question to all of the three on the podium. So just to be clear, you said the two main arteries are closed. That's an evidence. Is there any type of contingency plan that is for rerouting maybe somewhere the supply of humanitarian aid? Is there any other type point of entry for the aid? Or I'd like to hear you on that. Or is Rafah now totally isolated from any type of supply? And my other question. Okay. Yeah, no, go on. And I'll do a follow up.
Thanks. There is, as you know, the areas crossing in the north, which have been opened recently. There's nowhere near the volume of aid that comes in compared to Kerem Shalom and Rafah. Now, of course, we are looking at all possibilities, right? I mean, we didn't know that this was going to shut down these two crossings in the south that we rely on so heavily, not of our own choice, but because that's what we've been designated to use, right? So we're looking at, of course, all options for how can we kind of get something in there. It remains to be seen, but Eris is, of course, on the table, if you like. Sorry, the second part of your question?
The second part of my question is Rafah now isolated from any type of supply of aid? Because even if you go through Erez in the north, then is the road open?
Yeah, Exactly, and very good point. It's like what we've been talking about for a very long time. Why we have advocated for opening in the north, because of the illogical way of delivering aid in the north, that you have to go all the way to the south and then drive through a war zone to get to the north, where we've said, well, can't we just get in from the north? Now you flip that around and you say, we will have to drive through a war zone, but in the other direction to get from areas to the south. So of course we need to have aid as close to people as possible, and it is close to people. It is close to people. It's there, just on the other side of the border. So of course we need those openings.
And you had a question for the other colleagues?
Yes, just the last one. Also, some kind of technical question. Were you able to preposition any type of aid in the Al-Mawasi designated humanitarian zone, or is it only controlled or dealt by COGAT?
Yeah, some for UNICEF, some pre-positioning, but not of the things that we need day to day, which is water for UNICEF, and very little pre-positioning in that area of the high energy malnutrition supplies that we need for children. The only thing I'd add to what Jens said is that the conversation about where aid comes in is critical, and he's dead right. Areas will simply not be enough. It's also very important to underline that this is not just about goods coming in, it's about them being able to freely move around when they come in. And this has been the constant war of words and disinformation, to be frank, that's happened. Once goods come in, then we sit, and I've done this many times, for hours and hours and hours at checkpoints. As other United Nations senior officials have said, you know, they know this dance. You sit at a checkpoint for hours until knowing full well that the clock will tick and we won't be able to work in the dark. And so approval was gained, but time was not with us and we had to return. So the freedom of movement and more opening of checkpoints on the Gaza Strip is something.
You want to go ahead? Yeah.
We also, it was the pre-positioning of supplies. Yes, we indeed did pre-position supplies in a warehouse away from where we expected the military activities to be happening. But again, as James has said, I haven't seen the place, but from all descriptions, it's not an area that you'd be able to actually put supplies in, but we've put medical supplies, but again, they will run out very quickly. And the critical thing is, again, for the hospitals to be able to receive patients, which will be impossible in the middle of a conflict like this. We've only got 30% of hospitals functioning in any shape or form, and that is not a shape or form you or I would understand as a functioning hospital.
Okay, more questions from the room. Beza, then Emma, then Isa.
Thank you, Alessandra. You already mentioned about the contingency plan and relocation of the supplies, and you said it's going to run out quickly. But what I would like to ask that, at what level those relocated supplies can meet the needs of the people in the move right now? Can you give a date for that?
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't give an exact date. There are many types of supplies. We're about medical supplies. We're about fuel. We're about high nutrition biscuits. There are many kinds of supplies, and there may be various levels of availability of that. That doesn't, negate what I said before, which is that the overall picture is that aid is pretty much distributed immediately. Because the needs are so high. We don't have the luxury of having huge warehouses with a buffer stock.
Emma?
Just given this picture that you've painted of very few stores, can you just fast forward a couple of days? What does the situation look like if these two key crossings remain closed? And for WHO, for Margaret, please, are there any exceptions at all for patient transfers out of Gaza and maybe medical supplies coming in? Rick Peppercorn mentioned that Rafah was the main one taking almost all of the supplies in. Just spell out that situation, please. Thank you.
Jens?
You want me to crystal ball this a bit. Let me put it like this. If no fuel comes in for a prolonged period of time, it would be a very effective way of putting the humanitarian operation in its grave.
Clear. Margaret.
For the last 2 days, yesterday the crossing was closed and there were not any exceptions, no personnel in or out, evacuations, nothing. And my understanding is the same applies today. So nothing in, nothing out.
Yeah. Isabel.
Yes, sorry, Jens, but to put things in perspective, could you tell us what was the volume coming into Gaza through Rafah through the crossing in the last weeks and days, and what it means for, this is the second, is a quite rhetoric one, but what means that in the next also days and weeks you will have likely to negotiate with Israeli forces any kind of entry of humanitarian aid of any kind through Rafah?
Yeah, thank you. As you know, it's tracked. I don't have the tracking in front of me, but I'm happy to dig that out and share that with you, the exact numbers, what has been going in through the two crossings over the past week or so you can see what has been choked off exactly. Of course, we engage every single day, many times a day, I would say constantly, with through intermediaries with the IDF about access, getting this in. That of course will continue. Whether it bears fruit, well, time will tell.
Jamie, and then I go to the platform.
Hi, Jens. Could you tell us what IDF is telling you beyond the fact that they're simply denying access? Are they telling you anything about how long this could go on for? Are they telling you to stop bringing trucks to the border? What kind of instructions are they giving you, both for the security of your own personnel and partners, and for a possible continuation of the aid effort?
I don't have that information, Jamie. You would have to ask them what they say. We have been we've been told that the crossings are closed for goods and personnel in and out. We have been told, because we want, of course, to have access to Rafah to see what's going on, we have been denied access for the time being.
We 39 bodies were discovered in the Nasser and Shifa hospitals, including those of women and children, many of whom are believed to have serious signs of torture and summary executions, and potential examples of people being buried alive. If Margaret, you have some information about that, you can confirm this, the statement of the experts group. Thanks.
I wonder whether this is more a question for Ravina, who is actually our next speaker, but maybe she can come to the podium. Margaret, do you have anything you want to add on this?
No, it's exactly. We don't do the forensics. We don't do this area of work. So this is definitely for.
Ravina, you've already spoken about this in the past days. I don't know if you have an update on this. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, as Alessandra pointed out, and as you know, we have spoken about the issue of mass graves. What is clear is that mass graves exist in both the compounds of Al-Shifa and Nasser hospitals. Hundreds of bodies have been found. What is unclear is the circumstances under which these people were killed. We have received very worrying reports, including, as I've mentioned before, we've received reports that some of the bodies were found with their hands tied. Now, these are not reports that we are in a position to verify. There are several NGOs and other actors on the ground who are trying to gather more information. We're in close touch with them. But what we are insisting on is an independent investigation to establish exactly what happened. We know that the hostilities, or whether there was something further that needs to be examined.
Thank you very much. Christian. Maybe Ravina, if you stay on the podium. So, yeah, thank you. Christian.
Thank you very much. COJAT has been playing down the UN aid operation and has been suggesting that lots of other stuff is coming in. Does any one of you know what percentage of the overall aid the UN is supplying? Do you know of other significant aid deliveries coming in, Red Cross or private donations? That seems to be what COJAT is suggesting. And wasn't there also use of the military road at some point for aid deliveries? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Egyptian and Palestinian Red Crescent coordinate with us. So the number of trucks that we report on does include that. We have seen, as you have, some kind of commercial operation done by the Israelis. I think you will recall what has been referred to the Flower Massacre, which was one such operation that ended in tragedy. We have humanitarian experience and expertise to stand up a proper, principled humanitarian operation, and that is what we intend to continue to do. It is there, and we are not leaving Rafah, as James said. That goes for all of us. We intend to stay as long as is humanly possible.
Thank you. Unless Alex wants to add something now, so let's go to Nick.
Yeah, thank you. For Jens, I take your point that the Erez crossing is no substitute for Rafah and Kerem Shalom. But could you just give us an idea of what aid is coming through that particular crossing point? Can you also give us an update on the maritime deliveries on the floating pier? And again, you said before that this is no substitute, but it would just be useful to know where we are with that and if we can see aid coming in via that route anytime soon. And just as a quick side note to Alessandra, be good if the UN Women could actually circulate this report. We haven't seen it. It'd be great to have it. Thanks.
Just quickly answering this, we have sent it. In fact, both of me and Solange have sent it to you during the briefing, so you should have it in your email. And of course, our colleagues are available for questions. It's not a report, it's a press release with updated data. Jens.
Thank you. I hope the microphone is in the right position now. Thank you, Nick. Can I add that request to what Isabel asked about on the numbers of trucks or what we know has gone through areas? It's not data I have in front of me, but I'll be happy to investigate that. As to the pier and the maritime corridor, it's not functioning yet. We are not the ones building it, so you'll have to talk to the US authorities about that.
Yep. Sorry, I thought it's the hand in the room. Yeah, Isabel. Oh, but maybe. Yeah, sorry. It's a follow-up. Okay, go ahead.
If you can comment, Ravina, what all this means in human rights terms in Rafah, what is happening now?
Thanks, Isabella. I think my colleagues have very clearly set out what this means in humanitarian terms. It means that people are being forcibly relocated yet again, sometimes for the fourth, fifth, sixth time, to places that are not safe. And let us remember that these people include people who have been disabled as a result of the conduct of hostilities. This includes people who need dialysis treatment, otherwise they will die. They are being relocated to places that do not have the infrastructure or the resources to be able to host the mass displacement of this large number of people with such diverse needs. International humanitarian law prohibits the ordering of the displacement of civilians for reasons related to the conflict unless the security of the civilians involved or imperative military reasons so demand. Even then, this is subject to strict legal requirements, and Israel has strict obligations under international humanitarian law to ensure the safety and access of these individuals to medical care, to adequate food, to safe water, to sanitation. Failure to meet these obligations may amount to forced displacement, which is a war crime.
Yeah, I'd like to, Isabel, the last one, please.
Yes, I'll follow up. So does it mean that, as you said, the evacuations in this type of evacuations are prohibited unless completely necessary, which is not the case? So one more time is given your review, Israel is violating the international humanitarian law.
There are strong indications that this is being conducted in violation of international humanitarian law.
Thank you. Yuri.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra, and good morning, everyone. My question is for Ravina, so thank you to come to the podium for that. The first question is about the fact that you still don't have access to Gaza, even if you are required it. All the warnings from your office and from the High Commissioner have been ignored by Israel without exception. All what you said has been ignored. What is the next step? So at what point will the notion of war crime be surpassed in the language elements of your office to speak of crimes against humanity? Because nothing changed even when you are putting warnings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Yuri. Indeed, it's a source of immense frustration for us, the lack of access to be able to physically be there and corroborate information, interview witnesses, visit sites, examine the actual, situation on the ground. We are continuing to press for access. This is crucial. We are also continuing to carry out remote monitoring and put out information that we are managing to corroborate to try to bring some factual clarity, some legal clarity, and perhaps even some moral clarity to what is happening here. On situations like the discovery of the mass graves, what we were concerned about is that this will be yet another blip on the radar, yet more violations carried out in Gaza that just get forgotten about over time. Well, these violations should not get forgotten about. They need to be recorded. They need to be reported widely by the media. They need to result in pressure from member states that do have leverage over the parties to the conflict to bring such violations to an end. They need to be recorded so that there will be accountability, so that investigations do take place, and ultimately there is accountability, and the cycle of impunity does not continue over and over and over again as we have seen it. We have documented many violations that amount to war crimes, and that there are even indications of further atrocity crimes being committed. And it is our obligation and our duty to continue to speak out on these issues.
Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is very sobering meeting discussion, I must say. Ravina, I'd like to ask you about the mass graves, whether it is clearly determined that Israel, in fact, has dug these mass graves. I ask this because Israel just the other day came out with a release saying that the mass graves were dug by Gazans themselves before Israel's operation began. So I'd like your input on that? And also, I mean, is this still to be determined? And then how likely is it that an independent investigation will go ahead in the medium term, or is this something for the long term? Because do you believe that forensic experts will be given access to the area right now? How long is this likely to happen?
Thanks, Lisa. It is a complex issue. So as I said earlier, it is clear that mass graves exist, not only in the compounds of Al-Shifa and Nasser Hospital, but there are impromptu graves containing large numbers of bodies that exist across Gaza. A lot of people have been killed. More than 30,000 people have been killed. Graves are dug very quickly. People are buried. And these graves exist, in many parts of Gaza. What is worrying about this one in particular is that there's a large number of individuals in these graves who are unidentified. So their loved ones did not know whether they were alive or dead, and it's not clear the circumstances under which they were killed. Some of these graves, they did exist, and there were bodies there. The IDF claims that they dug up the bodies and they reburied them. It's not clear how many bodies were there initially, how many bodies were buried by the IDF. There are so many open questions here. And again, there are very worrying reports that indicate that some of the bodies may have been found with their hands tied. Now, we don't know. We haven't managed to corroborate these reports, but they are severe enough that we need to insist on an independent investigation. These claims cannot simply be dismissed, and we can't just take their word for it, that these were all bodies that were already pre-existing, dug up, and then reburied with respect. There needs to be an investigation. There needs to be independent assessment of the situation, and this is what we are insisting on.
Satoko?
Hello, good morning. I just want to follow up this international investigation. Which UN body or institution would be appropriate to create a mandate to set up an international investigation? Thank you.
Alessandra may have more to add on that. From our side, what we are calling for, well, we're calling for access for us, for the UN Human Rights Office. We are calling for access for the Commission of Inquiry, the UN Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory. And as you may know, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is also engaged on the situation. And there are ongoing investigations there.
Exactly, you said it all. Jan.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for giving me the floor. A question to Jens. Maybe you have said it, or I missed it. I was wondering, have the Israelis given you any official reason for closing the two crossings into Rafah?
Hi, Jan. No, not particularly, but it's part of the zone that they have now issued evacuation order for, but we have not gotten anything apart from that it's closed.
Second question from Nick.
Yeah, thank you. A question to Ravina and Margaret. There were reports last week that the former head of orthopedics at Al-Shifa, Dr. Al-Bursh, had died in Israeli custody. Have either of you been able to get any further information on the circumstances or cause of his death? Thank you.
No, I'm afraid not, Nick, but let me check if colleagues have managed to gather any further information on this. I'll get back to you.
And Margaret makes a no sign, so yeah. Well, you want to say something? No?
Likewise, I'll follow up for you, Nick, and I will see if we've got more information on this tragedy.
Thank you very much. Catherine.
Yes, good morning to all. Thank you, Alessandra. Two questions my side. A follow-up about question already asked about, according to you, Alessandra, which entity at the UN is able to take any decision regarding the fact that Israel is systematically refusing the request of access to visit Gaza to heads of agencies, not only human rights, but other heads of agencies have requested to go and visit Gaza and West Bank, and they haven't got a positive answer. They got no answer, in fact. And I'd like also to come back to the West Bank. Could you tell us more about the situation in the West Bank? I don't know, Jens or James or Margaret, any of you, because we know that some people from Gaza are trapped in the West Bank since the beginning of the events in October. What about Ravina? What's happening there? Because people are focused on Gaza, but there's a lot of things happening apparently in West Bank.
Ravina said about the bodies. I just wanted to mention that Filippo Lazzarini was indeed denied access. That was on the 5th of May. And he put out a statement, again, asking for that access and concluding that the denial of humanitarian access is a violation of humanitarian law. But I think Ravina mentioned the bodies, and maybe I don't know who would like to take up the second part of the question about the West Bank. Maybe Jens, you want to start on this, or maybe James, if you also have something on the children in that area.
Just very quickly, first of all, thanks, Catherine, for raising the West Bank, because it is not as much in focus, and it should be, because things are happening there as well. You will see in our situation reports that come out 3 times a week, as you know. There's a new one online this morning. There is a section about what is going on in the West Bank. A lot of it has to do with settler violence, which has seen a spike in recent times, and we do see reports of buildings and structures inside refugee camps in the West Bank being bulldozed. But I will refer you to our report for details.
Oh, sorry.
No, I will get more recent information, remind me, but certainly if we look at the data that UNICEF got from the end of last year, there were, in fact, in the last 12 weeks of 2023, 83 children killed in the West Bank. That was more than double all children killed the year previous to that. So we are seeing spikes in children being killed across the occupied territories.
Yeah, Ravina, and then Margaret. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reading our latest update. Thank you, Kathleen, for that question, because obviously the situation in the West Bank also remains very difficult for the Palestinians living there. We have verified that since the 7th of October and until the 6th of May, 475 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The data that we have suggests that of these, 120 are children. We are also continuing to receive reports of settler violence, continuing to receive reports of arbitrary arrest, detention, and ill treatment, as well as restrictions of freedom of expression, movement restrictions as well.
And just to add, we've recorded very high numbers of attacks on healthcare. We have recorded at least 446 attacks, which have resulted in 12 fatalities and 95 injuries. Now, it should be noted that also in Israel, there have been 68 attacks on healthcare with 24 deaths and 34 injuries.
Thank you very much. And I'm seeing here in the chat if colleagues could give this data on the West Bank in writing at the moment to all journalists, that would be useful. There is also one question in the chat, Jens, I had not seen from Christian, that just asks whether, where is it? The military road to Wadi Gaza, I think, is being used for aid. Don't know if you have an answer to that. Military road in brackets.
Sorry. Yeah, and apologies, I forgot that question. I'll have to check. But if Kerem Shalom, which is also a screening point, is closed, the question remains if anything is being screened, right? And it needs to be screened before it gets on the military road to what's called Gate 96 entry point further to the north. But let me double check on that. Want to say something?
No, it's just an important point that Jens has mentioned, that areas as well, anything that goes through areas has to go through Kerem Shalom. So that's closed, then nothing is being cleared.
Sorry, Catherine.
Yes, this is just to come back to the UN Women press release. It was released yesterday in New York. So
yeah,
yeah,
it
Geneva.
did, and yeah, no, exactly, and that's what I said at the beginning when I started reading it. The press release was put out yesterday night. We received it in the evening, and we were asked by our UN women colleagues to flag it to you, which I did, especially that now we were having this briefing on Gaza, Catherine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, for me, my colleagues in New York did already cover it when it comes.
Yeah, probably some.
Yeah, thank you.
Some of your media will probably have covered it also from New York. Some others may have not seen it, and that is why basically we are the first UN briefing after that they published it. So they have asked us to flag it. Jeremy, and then maybe we'll go to the next subject. Yes.
Yeah, a quick one for Margaret. I'm reading that 2 hospitals are evacuating the patients in South Rafah, South Gaza. So I'd like to know, is it you said I think that Al-Najjar is not evacuating. So just to understand, what are your information? Which hospitals are evacuating?
Certainly my information from this morning, from my briefing that I got this morning, was that Al-Najjar was currently staying open, even though they were in the zone, and perhaps the European had the same issue. But my understanding was the hospitals would continue functioning, and they are trying to serve their patients as best they can.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you, correspondents, but also thanks to all our colleagues here. I'd like to ask Ravina to stay with us, as she has another point of brief, and thanks to Margaret, Jens, and James. And again, please be please be reminded that at 3:30 this afternoon, the Secretary General will speak to the press on the situation in Gaza. So, and it will be on UN Web TV. You want to get a little bit closer for the camera? Sorry, I think they are just more central. Thank you very much, Ravina. So you have another point on Russia and the crackdown on journalists. Quite timely, since the 3rd of May, as we all know, was World Press Freedom Day, and we'll speak about this in a moment. Please.
Exactly, Alessandra. You should have received a press release about an hour ago on Russia. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is concerned by the increasing number of journalists charged, convicted, and jailed in Russia for their independent reporting in what appears to be an intensification of a crackdown on dissenting voices. The continuous attacks on free speech and the criminalization of independent journalism in Russia is very troubling. Since the start of the invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, the number of imprisoned journalists in Russia has reached an all-time high. The crackdown on journalists' independent work must immediately cease, and the right to inform, which is a key component of the right to freedom of expression, needs to be upheld. At least 30 journalists are currently detained in Russia under a variety of criminal charges, and these include charges ranging from terrorism, extremism, disseminating knowingly false information about the armed forces, spying, treason, extortion, infringing upon people's rights, violating the provisions of the law on foreign agents, inciting mass disturbances, illegal possession of explosives, and illegal possession of drugs. Out of the 30 reporters deprived of their liberty, 12 are serving prison sentences ranging from 5.5 to 22 years in prison. Since March, at least 7 journalists have faced administrative or criminal charges, particularly for criticism of Russia's actions in Ukraine or for alleged links to the late opposition politician Alexei Navalny and his anti-corruption foundation. The Russian authorities appear to be attempting to further strengthen control of the narrative, both around domestic issues and around the conduct of hostilities in Ukraine. As a result, people in Russia have increasingly restricted access to non-state information and viewpoints, which hampers their ability to benefit from diverse sources and to make fully informed decisions on matters of vital public interest. We are also concerned about the frequent use of the broad legislative framework to combat terrorism and extremism, and we call on the authorities to amend the legislation to comply fully with principles of legality, necessity, and proportionality under international human rights law. Journalists should be able to work in a safe environment without fear of reprisals. We call on the authorities to immediately drop charges against journalists who have been detained solely for doing their jobs and to release them.
Thank you very much, Ravina. Jeremy.
Thanks, Ravina. We know that several opposition figures have been offered to fight in Ukraine and France, just like many prisoners in Russia. Do you have any information that journalists who are in prison have been offered the same, the same thing?
That's a good question, Jeremy. I don't have specific information on journalists who've been offered the same thing. What is worrying, of course, is the lack of transparency as well with regards to many of these moves. And again, the fact that independent journalism is being cracked down upon, it just leads to a level of uncertainty and facilitates a climate of misinformation, disinformation, chaos, and panic for people who don't know what their rights are in these circumstances. But whether journalists have specifically been targeted on this, I'll check and get back to you if we have information.
Thank you very much. Any other question to Ravina on this particular subject on the room or online? No. Oh, yes, Lisa Schlein.
Yeah, thanks. Ravina, how many of the imprisoned journalists are foreign journalists, and are they specifically imprisoned as political hostages, having something to do with the country? Like there are at least one who is very famous in the United States who is still being held there. There is also someone from Radio Free Europe, I think, who has been held there and so forth. And then I was wondering who are the journalists that are selected for imprisonment? What I mean is that there are some Western journalists from CNN, from other agencies that somehow or other, at least until now, have been able to report there. So I'm wondering, how these people are chosen as to who should be imprisoned and who is to be allowed there. And is it your contention that Russia in general is not a safe place in which to be a journalist? Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. A few points in response to your questions. So as I mentioned, since March, at least 7 journalists have faced administrative or criminal charges. All 7 of these are Russian journalists, and they have faced these charges in relation to their reporting either of the war on Ukraine or in relation to Alexei Navalny, the late opposition leader. On the international journalists, according to recent reports, 12 of the 17 foreign national journalists detained worldwide are in Russia. So 12 foreign national journalists are currently detained in Russia. And on why certain journalists are targeted and others are not, I mean, that really is a question for the Russian authorities, and that I hope you will ask them that question.
Thank you very much. Any other question in the room? I don't see also any. Sorry, Lisa has a follow-up. Pardon.
Yeah, I asked whether
is being challenged, an official narrative is being challenged, particularly with regards to the war on Ukraine. Continuous attacks amount effectively to a criminalization of independent journalism in Russia.
Thank you very much. And before we close this issue, sorry, please let me remind you of an event which is taking place this afternoon at the Palais des Nations. As you may have seen, the World Press Freedom Day this year has been dedicated to the importance of journalism and freedom of expression in the context of the current global environmental crisis. The idea is to highlight the significant role that the press, journalism, and access to information play to ensure and secure a sustainable future that respects the right of individuals, the diversity of their voices, and gender equality. In this context, UNESCO, the liaison office here in Geneva, UNEP, WHO, OHCHR, the permanent mission of Austria to Geneva, the permanent mission of Chile to Geneva, and the Geneva Press Club, together with the UN Geneva, UNOG, organizes an event today from 3 to 6 p.m. in room 23 of the Palais des Nations. This event is really meant to focus on science communication in shaping public understanding and policy making regarding environmental issues. There's a lot to say about safeguarding journalists and scientists, particularly women, against the specific challenges and threats they encounter in the fields related to environmental reporting on environmental issues. Independent journalists and scientists are crucial actors in helping our society separate facts from fiction and take informed decisions in the area of environmental policies, which is particularly important at this time. So we hope we will see you in room 23 this afternoon at 3 o'clock. The Director General of UN Geneva will open the meeting. Quite a few speakers, I think of very interesting ones. They will speak about combating climate disinformation, also protecting environmental journalists and scientists. So let's see you in room 23 this afternoon. And if there are no other questions on this subject, I thank Ravina very much. I hope you will see you this afternoon. And let me just tell you that the Committee Against Torture will conclude its 79th session next Friday at 10 a.m. They have examined the reports of Austria, Honduras, Azerbaijan, Liechtenstein, North Macedonia, and Finland, and they will publish on Friday the concluding observation of these countries, The Committee on the Rights of the Child is concluding this morning the review of the report of Namibia, and this afternoon will begin consideration of the report of Guatemala. The countries to be examined next are Georgia, Mali, Panama, Egypt, Bhutan, Estonia, and Paraguay. And I think that's all I had for you. I just wanted to also say thank you very much to everyone for the collaboration about the new operational hours at the Palais des Nations. I think this weekend we also already have some colleagues who have been contacting UNIS to have access. It worked, so let's hope that it continues to work well. And in this regard, let me remind you that as of now, as of last week, in fact, with the information about the week ahead, Solange will also send out the information on who is the senior UNIS officer on duty during the weekend. Last weekend it was Rolando, and we will publish every weekend the information so that you know whom you have to contact during the weekend if you need us. Thank you very much to everyone, and I'll see you on Friday. Thank you.